This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, alongside my sidekick and usual partner in crime. That is Doc from Doc and Jock, John Macaroon. John, how's it going?
Vito, always good to check in with you. The Podfather, great article that the network did about you.
That was pretty cool to see. Yeah, a lot of people are now interested and now know that I do a podcast, I think.
It was very cool because, I get a chance to showcase you a little bit. It's a great article. I know that we definitely maybe pinched a little bit from the Detroit Free Press, but I definitely wanted to highlight what you are doing here because you're doing great things. You're working hard. You're trying to get great guests for the network. You're doing 2 and 3 podcasts for this very fine network. So it's very cool to highlight those that are doing great things. And I always look forward to having you in here talking about the Detroit Tigers. But this week, I'm a little bit more feisty than usual because spring training, when people are evaluating it, it's swinging wildly. And the reason why I'm a little bit upset is people are now starting to talk about Anibal Sanchez just due to the fact that he had 2 good starts. Just 2 in spring training are starting to wonder, hey, can Anibal Sanchez make it on this roster? And I go, wait a minute. He faced the New York Mets. Their lineup in spring training wasn't all that great. And you are basing keeping a guy making $16 million plus on your roster based upon a couple performances. You got to realize, in totality, when you look at spring training, many people are looking at it and going, well, it's not really that important, but Anibal Sanchez definitely has to do a lot more to convince me that he needs to be on this roster. How are you looking at it?
Well, the thing is, you got to factor in that, Mike Pelfrey, Mark Lowe, those guys are on the chopping block, maybe. Mike Pelfrey, a guy that's competing for the 5th starter job along with Anibal or a long relief spot in the bullpen. When you have to decide between the two right now, I think you would have to choose Anibal Sanchez. It's clear cut that he's done better in his recent outings than Mike Pelfrey has. Pelfrey should be off the roster for sure. Sanchez has resurrected some status as not a bona fide starting pitcher, but as a semi-respectable starting pitcher. So if he can give you, it's only, in spring training, it's a lot different kind of ball clubs and lineups that you're facing, throwing only 4 innings about per start too. So for me, it's hard to gauge completely a guy's productivity in spring training and really taking it all in and determining what it really means. It's hard to determine what it really means because you are facing less competition. We've talked about that numerous times on Tigers Talk already, Doc. But I would say right now, Anibal Sanchez is leaps and bounds above Mike Pelfrey in the race for the 5th starter job or at least a long relief spot in the pen. Because right now, Pelfrey does not deserve a spot on the roster at all, Doc, in my opinion. Sanchez does.
Many people are talking about Pelfrey being cut. Is that a real likelihood? And I don't think they're going to send him to the minors. Is that if he doesn't make the major league roster, is Mike Pelfrey going to get cut?
Well, I think he should. I don't think you would want him in. What's the purpose of putting him in AAA? What's the purpose for Mike Pelfrey at this point in his major league career to be in AAA Toledo? I don't think he's a minor league pitcher and wants to be that. Well, the thing is he even good enough to be a minor league pitcher? And is it worth it, once again, for the Tigers to stash him down there? You look for depth in the minors, in AAA specifically, and stashing guys that maybe can contribute to the Major League roster eventually. Thing is, do you really expect him to contribute significantly or in a positive fashion if they did stash him on the AAA roster to start the season and then were to call him up later on in the season because they need reinforcements because of an injury or somebody struggling? I don't think he's a guy you want to turn to. So I don't think that's a strong alternative. And the more likely solution, because of that being said, Doc, is cutting Mike Pelfrey. So buying him out and dealing with the contract that has been an albatross. And we used that term last year, threw it around to describe Anibal Sanchez's contract. And Jordan Zimmerman, actually, more specifically, because of how big, how lengthy it is. And Zimmerman is making too much money. But on a smaller scale, Pelfrey definitely is. And because it is on a smaller scale, you can buy him out. The Tigers, I don't know how willing they are because of the luxury tax threshold. They're already at the limit for that. Don't want to spend much more money, and you have to spend money to buy out a player who's still in a contract year, as Pelfrey is for 2017. So are they willing to, with that factor taken into account? Maybe not as strongly as you would think when looking at a guy that has been struggling now since they signed him last season, before last season specifically. So there is that factor, and it's a variable you have to weigh when deciding whether or not you really believe the Tigers will cut Mike Pelfrey. But I think they will, and I think they should. I think it's been, Doc, I mean, we've talked about this. Every fan's talked about this that watches the Tigers. Pelfrey should have been cut what? Last year, mid-season? I mean, when he showed that he wasn't good enough to cut the mustard seed. And he hasn't proven anything much more than that in spring training this spring.
Now, with Anibal Sanchez, many people are going, okay, he did admit to making a small, minor adjustment in terms of his delivery, and it's maybe helped him out a little bit, getting guys out, striking guys out, allowing himself to at least not get crunched when he's going up there. Now, the Mets obviously didn't feature the power lineup that we all expect. When you have, hey, Tim Tebow out there trying to take hacks, trying to make the team, it makes it for an easier situation for Anibal Sanchez. But I do give him credit that he is battling. He is trying his absolute best to figure it out. But I just think that when you look at Major League competition, when you look at what Anibal Sanchez features, it just looks like a guy that, at the very best, can only get you maybe an inning. At the very best is a guy that maybe you hope you can use in spot situations. But when you look at Anibal Sanchez and what he can contribute to the team, I just don't have the confidence right now. And a couple starts that go well for you in spring training don't really do it for me.
Well, they shouldn't move the needle a ton. They really don't when you look at what Sanchez has done the past 2 seasons, which hasn't been productive baseball as a starting pitcher. So when you look at his lackluster numbers, an ERA of 4.99 and an ERA above 5 as well in the past 2 seasons, you know what? You have to say to yourself that Sanchez is not really fit for the 5th starter job any longer. Thing is, he's shown enough to warrant a roster spot on the Tigers' opening day roster. That's why I think he'll make it, and because it's tougher to cut him than it is to cut ties with Pelfrey at this point when you consider their contracts, as I talked about. You know, Pelfrey is making much less money. So because of that, because his albatross of a contract, once again to bring up that term, because his albatross, Pelfrey that is, of a contract is on a lesser scale, Tigers probably are more willing to cut him, and it's more worth their while to do so. Then with Sanchez, when you have to buy him out and buy him out for much more money than you have to buy out for the contract of Mike Pelfrey.
Okay, Vito, and then the big news of the week. Unfortunately, what did we say had to happen for the Detroit Tigers to have any sort of success in the 2017 season? Everybody had to be healthy. But when you look at it realistically, that was a big hope for everybody, that Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez, JD Martinez, Castellanos, all the pitchers, they all had to stay healthy, right? Did that happen? Unfortunately not. In spring training, one of the big guns got hurt. Now, at this point in time, JD Martinez is getting a second opinion regarding his injury, but it's a big deal. Anytime one of your big guns, a guy that you're counting on for production, goes out, you look at it and you go, oh, hell no, we did not need JD Martinez to get hurt. And when I heard that, oh no, I'm freaking out.
And JD Martinez already went down, remember, last year for a significant amount of time, then came back. Remember that game he came back in against the White Sox, hit that home run off of Chris Sale? That was brilliant, a great thing to see. But yes, you have to worry about JD Martinez and his now long-term health this season specifically, because if the Tigers want to make any kind of a run for the division, for a wild card, one of the 2 wild card spots that is in the American League this year, they have to have JD Martinez healthy. If they can't ensure that, well then, you know what? They're not going to win anything this year, and they'll be well below 500 in my opinion, Doc.
So fill everybody in. What was the injury that he sustained? And I do believe he's getting a second opinion, right, on it?
He's getting a second opinion, correct. And, well, Osmus has already said, now, this is coach speak here, and the manager is going to probably, you know, throw off the media and the fans and try to downplay the severity of it. But from what I'm hearing, JD will be all right. I mean, I would expect him to start opening day as well in right field. And if he does, if he's, you know, healthy enough to do that and builds up some health as the season progresses into its first few weeks and first month, then you don't have to probably worry about him and this injury lingering. But then there was, remember, the flare-up for Miguel Cabrera in the World Baseball Classic with his back tightness. He's older than JD, and that might be more of a worrisome thing to track all season long, is that Miguel Cabrera injury status? Does something flare up for him? Does his tightness in his back flare up once again? If it does, I think you have to worry more about him and his long-term health because he's older than JD Martinez. So I'm saying you have to worry maybe about him and that flare-up and something else that could flare up for Miguel Cabrera more than JD Martinez at this point, even though we can't take this injury for JD Martinez lightly. And what is the latest on it, Doc? Because you're looking it up right now, I see.
Yep, JD Martinez sprained his right foot making a running catch this past Saturday. We'll have a stress CT scan on Friday in Charlotte, North Carolina. When Brett Ausmus was asked about it, he discussed it when the Tigers faced the Mets on Monday. So there's no timetable for his return on when he's coming back, but they are optimistic, but he is having a scan on Friday. So.
That'll prove to us what the severity of the injury really is. And you know what? Does that scare you when you hear CT scan? Because it means that they're really leery of the severity, you know?
You know, Vito, I'm concerned anytime it involves an aspect of someone's game that, we really need. JD Martinez's numbers were pretty good in terms of spring training, but what do we need him to improve upon? His defensive capabilities.
Yeah.
His numbers in the outfield are not that good. And when you look at it, any situation where you're looking at a foot injury, great. If he's just maybe even a quarter step slow in the outfield, that might lead to a couple runs that you can't afford to give up at this point in time. When you look at it, it's not the best time at all to sustain an injury. And it's concerning because it highlights the fears that I think a lot of people have with the Detroit Tigers is the lack of depth. Mm-hmm. If anybody goes down for a sustained period of time, and you see it throughout baseball, what you've watched, guys go down 15 days. They go down for months at a time if they sustain injuries. They get hit in the hand sometimes when they're batting. They get, hamstring pulls when they're trying to steal bases. And this team, it seems like, in order for them to have any sort of success throughout the year, can't afford to have any injuries. And when you see something like this, not only does it mean that we got to be on alert for JD Martinez, we got to watch him throughout the entire season when he's out there because the risk of re-injury could be high with whatever he sustained.
And the foot injury, with JD Martinez is key. You are right, Doc. You nailed it for his defensive ability. What he does in right field with the glove, because you need solid productivity from him in that corner outfield spot. Last year, he declined defensively. Wasn't nearly as solid. Now, the year before that, he was a Gold Glove candidate. Did you know that? That's how much he shined in right field. Last year, took a step or two back, got hurt, and the injury might have affected him defensively because he wasn't as fleet of foot and getting to balls, wasn't able to track them down nearly as efficiently or just consistently, I guess you could use for the adjective to describe JD Martinez and that defense and what we saw out of him. Didn't get it done as consistently with the glove in right field. Now, the hope is that it doesn't linger. But for this roster as a whole, the hope is that they're not hamstrung by injuries. Could they be by the injury bug and get beaten up by it so severely, Doc, that it does cause the Tigers to finish below 500? Because that is something truly to watch out for. And once again, there is the Miguel Cabrera injury concern. There is the Victor Martinez injury concern. There is now the Nick Castellanos injury concern after last year. So a lot of injury concerns now with these guys. And if it does really bite the Tigers in the rear this season, I think they will finish well below 500. And so much has to really happen and go in the right direction for the Tigers for them to avoid finishing below 500, in my opinion right now. And the scary thing is, there is the JD Martinez concern already as we near the start of the regular season. Remember that too. April 3rd in Chicago is opening day for Los Tigres. It is. Remember that. And then they play the Red Sox at home for opening day at Comerica. So with opening day nearing, it is scary to think that JD Martinez might not be ready because this Tigers team could be a victim, or at least susceptible to an early rough start, like a 2-8 start. And if that does occur, you know what? It's hard to now it's a long season. It's not going to be over. But with this team, and if it continues to get ravaged by injuries after being 2-8 or something like that after a rough start, then this season could slowly but surely spiral out of control for the Tigers. And that's where they could finish well below 500. And that's what I'm trying to say here to you and the masses listening right now to this very edition of Tigers Talk, Doc. And my question for you after all that being said, all that nonsense and rambling, is Miguel Cabrera or JD Martinez, who do you worry more about with the injury bug?
I worry more about Miguel Cabrera because his offensive numbers, you see that when he's on point, my goodness, the team definitely, the offense looks so much different when Miguel Cabrera struggled last year, and I know a lot of people gave us flack because we started questioning Miguel Cabrera, and then he inevitably turned it around, and I expect similar things this year. I expect him to have ups and downs, but the problem that you see is he can't stay healthy for an entire season, and it causes problems on the base pads. It causes problems at first base. You see him in and out of the lineup, and you go, okay, a healthy Miguel Cabrera is the most dominant player in the entire major leagues. Dominant, a force, a guy that can hit the ball anywhere and any time. And sometimes when he gets hot, it just seems like he has an effortless swing and the ball just flies out of the ballpark, or he'll get doubles and singles and drive in a bunch of runs. But then when you notice that he's not with it and the bat goes cold, strikes out a lot, the slumps get prolonged, and then you realize, how long can we be confident that Miguel can keep this up year after year? Now, he's a talent. He's a Hall of Fame worthy talent that we got. And many people are questioning and wondering and having a little bit of skepticism regarding how long he can keep it moving forward. But the problem is you're always finding that his ankle is hurt, or his speed is affected, or something along the lines of his ability to run the base pads is affected due to getting nicked up. And he always comes into camp looking pretty good, and then as the season progresses, he kind of bulks back up a little bit, and he starts the season off maybe a little bit slower than we would like. But Miguel Cabrera, when he's on, and if he can just get on during the playoff streak, then forget about it. Because what happened? Collectively, last year, the final series versus Atlanta, they were shut down. If you want to just pinpoint and erase everything from 2016, Vito, everything, all the ups and downs, the question marks regarding Brad Ausmus, whatever was going on with the pitching staff, whatever was going on with the bullpen, you needed to go to Atlanta and win. And what happened collectively to that offense? It went kaput. And they were dominated by an Atlanta Braves pitching staff, and Miguel Cabrera included. So you look at it and you go, Miguel Cabrera is key for this team, but he also needs help, and he needs a lot of these guys to stay healthy. Victor Martinez, probably the next guy up. Justin Upton can carry the team as well. You need a lot of these guys to be healthy for the better part of the year, and Miguel Cabrera is right there at the forefront.
No doubt about that. And the Tigers also have, we've talked about, the fact that they have Victor Martinez and the concern with him as well. The injury bug, beating him up. And like I said, just to reiterate my point very quickly here on this week's episode, you have the injury concern now with JD Martinez and with Nick Castellanos after their 2016 campaigns in which they both suffered injuries. And the thing is, for the Tigers with their lackluster amount of depth, even though they signed Omar Infante, brought in the old Tigers second baseman and, Tigers legend. Not really. But brought him in as a reinforcement. Brendan Ryan as a reinforcement to play the infield as well. You know what? They're still lacking with that depth. And maybe they just need Don Kelly to suit up once again. But don't give Jim Leland that idea, who's now a special assistant to the front office. So I guess he doesn't have as much input or say, which is good because maybe he would bring back Don Kelly. Now, the scary thing is that more and more people, or at least my brother, I'll just say, I'm going to label my brother and call him out here. He was saying Andrew Romine might be the best candidate for the starting center field job to start opening day. God, that scares me big time, Doc.
Oh my goodness. Do you realize how many people have said that and started to realize, okay, wow, Andrew Romine had a decent spring. He's hitting the ball well. He's a glorified utility guy. Anthony Fennick wrote an article.
Remember, we talked about it a little bit, so we don't have to, have to dive into it too extensively here, but still, we got to talk about it a little bit, I think. Again.
On last week's podcast, I said that, which I found funny. Is as soon as I said it, people are saying, put him in center field. I said, he's dispensable. Andrew Romine, you can't have that guy be the guy to be in your center field. If you're featuring a center field with Andrew Romine in it, how are you going to tell and sell to a fan base that that's a winning organization? Come on now. He's a utility guy. Of course he's going to have good numbers here and there, but we're looking collectively. When you pan out to 162 games, it would seem to bear out that he's not the guy.
Well, could you imagine him having to start 145 or 150 games? How about 130 or 135 games in center field? Tigers won't be winning many games if that's the case. And I'll reiterate this point once again. That's their biggest void, is the center field position. I don't think it's the bullpen. It is that glaring void, in my opinion, in center field. That is a much bigger void to me on the Tigers roster going into opening day than their bullpen. I just said it. I mean, that's all I can say about that. And it's sad but true that Romine might be the best candidate just based on some spring training results, which once again, you can't take too much into account regarding spring training results. And that's why these fans getting carried away and saying that he's turning a corner and going to be a great now starting center fielder because he can hit better now than he used to. Have we seen his results since 2014 with the Tigers? Romine has been a lackluster guy at the plate and a guy that we know right now can't very sufficiently field center field and cover all that spacious ground in Comerica Park. And that might be the biggest thing, Doc, working against Romine and his candidacy for starting in center field come opening day, or at all on a big-time consistent basis. It's that he's never really played center field. So guess what, guys? Doesn't have the glove. And that's just without even bringing up what I already brought up. I already brought it up, the hitting, which is lackluster too, as we know, with Andy Romine, Doc.
So what everyone wants is a guy to learn on the job in center field in one of the biggest ballparks in the entire major leagues. Come on.
Isn't that sad? Well, it's like Jacoby Jones. Everybody's so infatuated with him right now. Did we see anything really great out of him? He had a great cup of tea with the roster, big league roster last year, a good 5-game stretch. His first game, I think it was, my dad was there, his family as well. My dad and his family, they didn't sit together. And no relation here between me and the Joneses. But I know the Joneses were there. They were glad, all proud. Jacoby Jones had a great game. Thing is, that wore off. It really did very quickly for Jacoby Jones. Thing is now, can he hit sufficiently? We've talked about it. Ryan Schuling, when he was on the podcast, talked about it. He strikes out way too often. So I don't think he's ready to start in center field either come opening day. And that's why, once again, it's the most glaring void, in my opinion. And then when you look at Mikey Matuk, he can't hit to save his life, can he? And we talked about that as well, so I don't want to go down that route too much on this week's podcast. But those are facts, and we got to talk about the facts as we near opening day.
And so I'm looking around as well. Obviously, Jacoby Jones, nobody's really won the job, like we've said. We're just trying to find out who stinks the least to try to earn this job.
Yep.
It's a very important job. But just to piggyback and wrap up what we talked about with the pitchers, many people are looking at, okay, the top 4 spots in the rotation are set. You got Zimmerman, Verlander, Norris, and Michael Fulmer. So you got the 4 set. And many people are wondering, Boyd has done a solid job, but Anibal Sanchez is coming on, and they're looking at, wow, when he made that pitching adjustment, he now might be, with 2 starts left, trying to earn his way into that number 5 spot. And I'm just thinking that if it's between Boyd and Sanchez, I know that Boyd has an option left to go back to the minors. You don't want him to start in the minors. I think that you let him come up, and he's done enough. He's had solid outings. I just think that Anibal Sanchez, if he starts the year off pitching very well, then hey, now you got another long relief guy, and if you're going to keep Pelfrey, you stick them both in the bullpen, and you hope that they can be consistent throughout the entire year because that bullpen needs a little bit more help than the starting rotation. I think that if you go with anybody other than Boyd in that 5th spot, I think you're going to disappoint a lot of people because then what it does for me, it kicks off the notion that the money that's being paid to Anibal Sanchez is dictating the decision. Because if it's a fair decision, if it's close and they go with Anibal Sanchez, the only factor that you can look at is the money. Because Boyd has an option to go to the minors. You can stick him in there. But I would not have any confidence. If number 5 is Anibal Sanchez, I know early on in the year you don't feature the number 5 guy as often. But if that's the case, I'm going to be looking, Vito, to be very skeptical regarding how the decisions are made. I know it's close regarding the pitchers, but you cannot field a team with a guy like Anibal Sanchez because he may have stretches of being positive. He's a major league pitcher, but I just think that when it shakes out over the course of 162 games, they should be able to realize he's not the guy, and you'd rather have Boyd and Norris gain confidence, gain experience early in the year because a lot of people don't think the Tigers are going to do much. So you have to be in that situation, and you have to be in that mindset. Let Boyd and Norris learn quickly on the job if you're going to have success later in the year. What good is it going to do to put Boyd in the minor leagues at this point in time? Nothing. It would hurt his confidence, I believe, and I think you might be losing a guy maybe down the line when his contract is up. You might be losing a guy mentally if you're going to continue to, jerk around with him and stick him in the minors.
And the thing is, Norris and Boyd deserve the reps right now. They really do. And then you have to also consider, if you want Pelfrey for depth later on in the season, you have Drew Verhagen, who's as good, if not better, right now. Younger, cheaper, all of the above than Mike Pelfrey. Pelfrey has never been really a vital member of this team, an asset, right? He's been wasted goods for a long, long time. And doesn't bring as much worth nearly as Matt Boyd or Daniel Norris at this point, guys that are long-term assets for this ball club as well, and get them the reps right now to build their confidence, as you said, and you are the true confidence builder, the true definition of that, as the psychologist and the resident psychologist of the DSP network, and a guy that's always trying to stroke my ego and then take it down after you stroke it. So I like that in you, and then you do reinstill some confidence in me. And the Tigers need to instill some confidence, my point here, in Boyd and Norris early on, so have them both be members of the starting rotation, and I think they will be to start the season, Doc.
All right, a couple more things before we get out of here. This will be a shorter version of the podcast because the studio is going to entertain a very big guest, a legendary guest, in just a few moments here when we start up the next podcast. So I'm very interested to see if this actually shakes out. But in regards to the Tigers, a couple things. Watching the Tigers versus the Mets, did you get caught up at all in Tebow mania? I know a lot of people are looking at him and going, oh, what can he do? You know, he got some hits in spring training, not a ton. He is going to be assigned to the Mets minor league affiliate, I think single A. But when I looked at it, I just go, he's just a raw baseball talent. And he's being featured to make money, to print some tickets, to generate some buzz. And it's unfortunate that he's being used for that. But when you look at his talent and what he's got, he's very raw. And you would wish that if he decided to play baseball, he would have made the decision several years back so that he could actually meet his potential. I just think he might be a little bit too old. And when I look at it, I'm not caught up in Tebow mania whatsoever. I just think that it's unfortunate that he's being used to probably garner attention more than it is the likelihood that he's going to be on a major league roster.
Well, he messed up his potential for a Major League Baseball career a long time ago when he stopped playing the game and went into football and then became a quarterback that couldn't throw the football. So, well, you know, with that being said, at quarterback, he was never good enough to cut the mustard seed in the NFL. We saw his passes not being as sharp or as crisp as they needed to be, and just other things with him, intangibles that just weren't there for Tim Tebow as a quarterback in the NFL. Now with his baseball career, which by the way will be a failed baseball career soon enough, there is the case to make that if he would have maybe continued playing after high school, he would have made a Major League Baseball career out of, or for himself. Well, it's not going to happen at this point, Timmy Tebow. Your dream is going to be crushed very soon. And sad but true, I kind of realize that you are more passionate about the game than I thought you were at first, but I still view this, Doc, as a smokescreen for a PR kind of setting or stunt, PR stunt. And honestly, it's going to end up being, if he was ever to make the major leagues, you know, it would be a PR nightmare for the Mets, for a guy that isn't, really worth their while to keep him on the roster because he's not going to really sustain a lot of productivity. He's really just that 25th man on the 25-man roster or the last guy that would, make a 40-man roster. And he would just be on the team not because that he was actually a valuable asset or a guy that could produce, and contribute something to the Major League Ball Club. He'd be on the team if he made the Mets or another ball club later on in what could be a Major League Baseball career, which once again I don't see happening for Tebow. But if he did make a team, it would be because of the fact that he would be this magnificent PR symbol for a ball club. He'd be nothing more than that. And the thing is, that takes away from the rest of the team, which is trying to compete and trying to win. And that's why his NFL career, along with the fact that he wasn't a good quarterback, like I said, that's why his NFL career went awry or went by the wayside. And that's why if he ever even did get good enough, really came on and started hitting bombs left and right, started becoming this magnificent ball player, if he made a Major League Ball Club, I think his career would end shortly too because of the fact that it would become about Tim Tebow. Even though the team might be succeeding, it would really become about Tim Tebow and what he's doing on the ball field, even if it would be in a very insignificant role, which I think it would be. He'd be the last guy on the roster, a guy that wouldn't really even see the ball field. And that's why it would be bad for a team to entertain the thought of putting him onto their Major League roster. And that's why, as I said before, it's not going to happen with Tim Tebow. The dream's about to die with him, Doc.
The dream is about to die for Tim Tebow. Before we get out of here, one player, though, we do got to highlight. I know many people are skeptical regarding how spring training evolves and how it carries over into the regular season. But last year, Justin Upton had a horrible spring, and it carried over into the first 4 months of the year when he had a horrific slump. But Brad Osman should be given credit for the 3 days off that he gave Justin Upton because it allowed him to reset psychologically, it allowed him to reset mentally, and he came out after those 3 days and mashed the hell out of the baseball. Now, he's come out and said that you can't discount the effects of changing leagues, that towards the end of that slump that he was thinking too much. There were changes to his swing that he didn't understand how to fix, but that reset, that time off that Brad Osman gave him really helped put things in perspective. And this year in the Grapefruit League, he's batting .292, .945 OPS, on-base percentage of .320, and his slugging percentage is .625. And he's batting with 4 home runs, 4 doubles, and he's a guy that's mashing the baseball right now. Do you think this carries over, and how important is Justin Upton to the success of this team offensively?
I'll just bring up this stat once again. The Lions, in the exhibition season, when they went 0-16 in the regular season, that exhibition campaign before that regular season, they were 4-0, then went 0-16 as we know. So what does it tell you? It could carry over, but doesn't mean that it will. And J-Up, I want to see him succeed in the first half. If he does, he's going to have a monster campaign, and he could be an all-star player for the Tigers if he does have a really solid first half, which I see him doing more than last year. I don't think he'll be as lackluster as he was in the first half of last season, Doc.
Do you think he can emerge as leader on this team? Do you think that he can take over that spot from Miguel Cabrera should Miguel, because you see that Miguel is a little bit hesitant to be a leader, maybe in the forefront. Maybe he's more a leader in the locker room kind of guy. But Justin Upton, I think that if he can perform at this kind of clip and really help this team offensively, he could emerge as a leader on this team.
Well, the thing is, it's about more than just producing on the field, as we've seen with Miguel Cabrera. You know what? He's not really a true leader in the clubhouse, I think. Victor Martinez is more that leader, has been noted as more that leader in the past. J-Up, is he really a strong leader in the clubhouse? I think he's a good guy. I've met him. I've interviewed him. I liked when I talked to him. I think he could be that. You're right. But remember, he's got a 2-year deal, technically. You know, he can opt out after this season, which means he might not be along for a long ride. And that would affect whether or not he can become a leader truly in the Tigers clubhouse, Doc.
I think we'll continue to pay attention to Justin Upton, the storylines regarding the pitchers. How do Anibal Sanchez, Mike Pelfrey do in their final 2 starts? How does this injury to JD Martinez progress? How do the guys look coming back from the World Baseball Classic? My goodness, Vito, we just flicked on the record button and 30 minutes went by. My goodness, man. Talking baseball with you, I'm really looking forward to the start of the season when we go a little bit longer and go more in depth into some of the storylines. You bring it, and I'm really happy to do this Tigers Talk podcast with you as we inch toward number 100.
Yes, sir, and we'll have a guest or two join us throughout the season as well as we near the start of the regular season. Should be a fun year, more than not a fun year, I think, for the Tigers. But injuries will play a role. How, prolonged will these injuries be, or how lingering will they be for JD, for Miguel Cabrera? That is key as well to take into account as we end this week's podcast. And from one podfather to another, Doc, we are signing off for this week's edition. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in, and tune in again to next week's episode. Have a good one. Goodbye.